Joe Biden. I think he made a catastrophic gaffe, or maybe, well, this is how he really feels. I don't know, but this is what he said.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Yeah, that's a pretty awful thing, and I believe that's what he thinks. I want to bring in, though, Katrina Pierson, senior advisor to Trump 2020. Katrina, I've been watching you for a long time. I've always been impressed. You've done a great job for your boss. But your reaction to this moment?
Well, thanks for having me on. I think that, people are used to the Joe Biden gaffe. And to your point, I think that this is different. This was a different tone, a different context, a different venue even. And I believe that's why it sparked outrage, not just among Republicans or Democrats, but really the black community as a whole really amplified Joe Biden's comments, because for so long we talk about Democrats taking the black vote for granted, and you've had this surgence of a Donald Trump candidacy who's been actually getting things done for the community. You've had the likes of the folks in Hollywood saying you've got to earn our vote, and Joe Biden goes on The Breakfast Club, a predominantly black audience, and is essentially offended by the questioner to ask him to come back and answer more questions. And by doing so, he decides that if you're not already voting for him, then you ain't black. Literally, hashtag you ain't black is what he said. So, I took highly offensive connotation to that, not to mention the fact that he was very condescending to his host. But a lot of people did. And I think that today is definitely a tide that's turned for candidate Joe Biden, because this is not just a gaffe. This is not just something that was an accident or even a joke that they're trying to make this out to be, though I do believe Joe Biden thinks that the black vote is a joke. But this is definitely a pattern of Joe Biden. It's a pattern of white liberals in general who clearly just want to give black voters lip service and not necessarily do anything.
A couple things. Joe Biden, it wasn't a gaffe. It wasn't a slip of a tongue. It was a mentality that he revealed, in my opinion. Also, Joe, I think, is suffering from being around for too long. He's been a senator since he was in his late 20s, which is astounding. Wow. And he's always been, in that little world, like the most important man in the room. And everybody's always laughing at his jokes. They're not laughing at him because he's charming. They're laughing at him because he's a senator or a vice president, because he's important. And I think that's where some of this is coming from. By the way, he's done this before, and even his sympathizers know that Joe can be, putting it sympathetically, tone deaf. Take a look at this.
You got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy. That's a storybook, man. Yeah.
It's a storybook, man, that a black person should be clean.
Yeah, exactly. Articulate.
Major issues. But here's the other thing, Katrina. Have you noticed the mainstream media? They have not been driving this story today. They've been either ignoring it or explaining it away, or, oh, that's just Joe. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have noticed that. And what was interesting is when the story broke earlier, there was a lot of Twitter traffic, and Twitter was actually censoring some of the tweets, not only my tweets, but from the Breakfast Club itself. And then all of a sudden, Black Twitter got involved. That's what we call it. And so you see all of the offended Black Twitterers out there, which is what really drove this to the top of the trending cycle. So hats off to the Black people actually paying attention to what's happening out there. But the other thing that Joe Biden suffers from is, aside from being, this coddled politician for a very long time, he also has been a Democrat, which means he's never been held accountable. His record has never been fully vetted, and his stories have never really been told. And so he's extremely comfortable in situations like this because he hasn't had to defend any of his policies, or he wouldn't be going on the Breakfast Club talking about criminal justice reform, something that he personally pushed.
Trump 2020 pivoted real quick. They put out a pretty devastating campaign ad. You can find it on Katrina's social media and everywhere else. Pretty well done. Anyway, thank you so much, Katrina Pierson, senior advisor to Trump 2020. To be continued, okay?
Great to have me. Thank you.
All right, you bet.